Good afternoon, and welcome everyone to this very special day. Thank you all for being with us as we honor Colonel David Mollahan and his wife Ingrid, as we unveil his portrait, and as we look forward to the years ahead and the accomplishments yet to come. I would like to recognize Colonel Mollahan's family who could be with us today, his wife Ingrid, and his sons Kellen and Sean. It is now my privilege to introduce Mr. Dean Moody for his remarks. Mr. Moody is a graduate of MMI classes of 1975 and 77. He is currently chairman of our Foundation Board of Trustees and Advisors. Mr. Moody.
Let me first say it's such an honor to be a part of this ceremony where we, at least in this small way, honor our President David Mollahan. Suzanne, you'll remember I sent you an email 2 or 3 weeks ago asking how long David had been here. And the reason was I wanted to say that I had the distinct privilege some 7 or 8 years ago to serve on the state selection committee, as our friend Mr. Rayne did as well, to pick our next president after the departure of Colonel Jim Benson. It was a very formalized process, very organized, took a long time. There were at least 12 members, maybe more. Faculty, alumni, people from the 2-year college system, had a lot of candidates, a handful of very fine candidates, but I can tell you, long story short, that it became very clear very quickly, at least to me, and I think to others, because we started talking pretty quickly, that the guy we wanted was this somewhat newly retired Marine colonel, helicopter pilot named David Mollahan. I didn't know David from Adam's house cat. Got to know him over the period of these interviews. We had a lot of background information. And I have to tell you quickly what struck me, maybe more than anything. Here we were considering the next president of this school. And this guy was a peer of mine. He was my age. He is my age. And for me, that was a new landscape. Having grown up in this community and having gone to school here for 5 years, I actually had at least 3 presidents in my 5 years, just an odd circumstances how that worked out, and have known each of them since. In a cadet's mind's eye, in a teenager's mind's eye, they were all old dudes. They were all typically old, retired military dudes, with all due respect. So I have very good relationships, had very good relationships with most of them. I'm on the Board of Trustees. I remember, frankly, my impression of the Board of Trustees was this group of old men in black suits that were somewhat mysterious that you might catch a glimpse of once or twice a school year. I hope that's not your impression of me or any of the rest of the Board of Trustees. I know it's not the impression of your president. He is certainly not an old dude because he's my age. But what struck me beyond that was here was someone my age who had spent his career, a 30-year career in the Marines, and as I got to know him and got to know what type of individual he was, it just struck a chord that here was someone of the quality and character of a David Mollahan, and he's been in the Marine Corps for 30 years. And what that did for me, it humbled me. I spent that same 30 years trying to build a law practice, raising a family, safe, comfortable in Montgomery, Alabama, and here was somebody my age all over the world defending this country and allowing me to do what I was doing in that 30 years. So it really made an impression on me. So much so it made me think, and you're going to say this is odd, but I thought of that movie, A Few Good Men. Y'all all know it. The last few minutes or what are important, they're in the courtroom. It's the court-martial proceeding of the 2 young Marines who are charged with the death of a fellow Marine in what's essentially a hazing incident. And Tom Cruise is young, I think a Navy lieutenant in the movie, Lieutenant Caffey. He's the JAG officer, he's the defense lawyer. And he's just called to the stand, the old guard Marine colonel, Colonel Jessup, played by Jack Nicholson. And as the cross-examination gets more pointed quickly and more accusatory, the colonel from the stand stops him. He says, "Son, and these are my words, not his, but the point. He says, son, have you ever had to stand post for your country? Ever had to carry a weapon in defense of your country? Ever had to fire that weapon at your enemy? Ever had your enemy fire his weapon at you? And to each of those questions, the young JAG officer respectfully responds, no, sir. Then the colonel from the witness stand says, then you don't have any idea what we're talking about here. You don't have any idea what's at stake. And what I thought was, I'm so grateful. And then he issues those words you all know, not the, you can't handle the truth, but he says, you want me on that wall. You need me on that wall. And I thought how grateful I was that the likes of David Mollahan, that post and that wall that he stood in the Marine Corps for 30 years, is now at Marion Military Institute. We're very fortunate. David, you've changed the literal landscape of this institution for years and years and years to come. All for the good, all for the better. And for that, we're truly grateful. If you've never heard him speak, he inspires me every time. I don't care whether the Cadet Corps, our Board of Trustees, an alumni group, or a potential donor. His focus and his commitment and his belief in the mission of this school literally comes out his pores. And it inspires me every time. I'm so proud for him to represent this school in front of anybody, anytime, anywhere. David, thank you. My heartiest congratulations today, and I'm so glad your sons could be here as well. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's also my privilege to introduce our next speaker, who needs little introduction, but he is an alumnus, a 1964, I believe, alumnus. He is, like David, one of those that believes keenly in the mission of Marion Military Institute. He is a supporter. His support is literally unparalleled to this institution. And I ask you to please give a warm welcome to a true, true friend of this institution, Mr. Jimmy Rayne.
Thank you, Dean. It's truly an honor and a privilege to be in this chapel again with all of you. It never ceases to inspire me and humble me every time I come here and look into the faces of the future of my country. You know, as an alumnus and a believer in this institution and in its mission, we all want its leadership to be placed into the most competent, strongest hands possible. And I was privileged to serve on the selection committee 7+ years ago when Colonel Benson announced his retirement and our leaving. And as Dean said, it was a very formalized process. I had actually never participated in a selection committee like that one. At that time, Bradley Byrne was the chancellor of the 2-year education system in Alabama, and Bradley was charged with the responsibility to select this committee and appoint this committee. And to give you just a brief history before that, the chancellor who served before him worked diligently to undo legislation that many of the supporters of this school had worked diligently to enact, that would remove Marion from the private sector into the public sector because we were in deep need of funding. And we got that done, and then that chancellor did not believe in that and wanted to remove it. And thanks to the loyal support and commitment of our alumnus, we mounted a pretty strong effort. And we met with the governor, and pardon my language, we raised holy hell. And I don't think Bradley wanted any part of that, so he chose that committee very wisely. And so when that process began, we had a lot of applicants. And I'll be honest with you, the applications were very long, they were detailed, and they contained some essays from the candidates. And I can tell you honestly that I read every single one of them. And we were asked by the chairman of that committee to rank those applications by the one you favored the most. I can't remember now how many people served on that committee, but it was, I think, 7, 8, 9, 10, something like that. It took me quite a while to get through all of those applications. But the number one application for me was David Mollahan. And as an alumnus of this school, like Dean, I wanted to make sure that the mission that had been instilled in me and what I believed was the mission for our country would be carried on by someone who truly believed what our responsibility was. And our responsibility is to our nation and to its security. I know that not all of you will take up that cause, but some of you will. And I want to be a part, and I know David did, to make sure that we had equipped you and trained you and helped you in every possible way we could to support you to stand on that wall. I wish like hell I could be there with you, but I can't. And the very least I can do is support you. And in the past 7 years, I have watched this school transformed by the leadership. He uses that word a lot. Have you noticed that? You hear him talk about leadership a lot? And see, that's what we need in our country. Leadership. Leadership where you place the mission above yourself. There are not many places left anymore that do that, but this is one of them, and he believes in that. And I am so grateful that we chose him to be the president of this institution. And believe me, if you never believe anything else I ever tell you, believe this: one day, I don't know when it'll be, but one day you will look back and you will say, thank God for David Mollahan, and thank God for Marion Military Institute. So I'm honored to be asked to be here today to honor my friend and whom I admire, his wife, and I'm so happy that his 2 sons could be here. And so it's with great pleasure that I participate and say thank you.
Woo. All right, well, hooah. Hoorah. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, sir. I want to welcome the Corps of Cadets here. I'm glad you all could be here. I know this wasn't mandatory, right? Anyway, it's good to have you with you. I'm really happy that you're participating in this or getting at least to observe this. Thank you for being here. I'd also like to acknowledge our faculty and staff that are here as well. Thank you for attending this. I appreciate that. And on behalf of my wife Ingrid, my 2 sons, myself, and all of us at MMI, we have a number of special guests here as well, and I want to thank you for attending. We appreciate you being here. You know, I have to admit that I really had to think about this idea of having my portrait done while still a sitting president, and contrary to all these nice comments, that doesn't mean I'm leaving right away, at least I'm not planning on it. But I had to think about that, and then during a recent visit to Troy University, in fact we did this last year, we happened to see a very nice portrait of Dr. Hawkins, who was the chancellor of Troy University, and it was in their administration building. So we figured, you know, if it's appropriate for Troy's sitting chancellor, certainly doing a portrait unveiling for MMI sitting president was equally appropriate. But actually, it was also a matter of what I'll call portrait logistics that drove us to do the portraits and the unveilings for both Colonel Benson, our previous president, whose portrait is up here now, and mine within the same few months. So all that's to say and to reinforce, with this portrait and this ceremony today, I'm still planning on being here, but I will admit it will be very interesting to see my own portrait sitting in this chapel while I'm still here. Anyway, I want to thank Dean Moody and Jimmy, Rayne, thank you for the very, very gracious, kind comments, and thank you for all the support you two provide this school. You do so much for us. You're the ideal alumni, and we really appreciate everything that you do. So thank you, and thank you for being here. I also want to acknowledge the MMI Foundation for providing the resources that have allowed us to have these newest portraits done. And I also want to say thank you and well done to Suzanne McKee. Suzanne, where are you? Over there. For her initiative in getting all this going after some earlier fits and starts. We talked about a portrait, certainly for the previous president, for some time, and she was the one that finally tracked down an accomplished portrait artist and then was responsible for bringing it all together last November for Colonel Benson, and then, of course, today for me as the current president. You know, I think it's important to note, however, that these portraits are much, much less about the presidents whose likenesses are immortalized in oil, but much, much more about the legacy, the history, and the continuity of the institution itself. Presidents are certainly the faces of the institutions they preside over, but they also represent, in these pictures and these portraits, an era, a window of time, each unique and distinct for the happenings, the faculty and staff, and the cadets of that particular time. And so each portrait fits neatly within the whole portrait display to maintain a kind of unvisual or a kind of unbroken visual of the college's history and the lineage and the entire span of its history. From the very first president, Colonel J.T. Murphy, on that end, all the way down to what will be the current president over here directly opposite him. For me, to be a part of this lineage is truly a great honor, and it is very, very humbling, because these are all very highly accomplished people here who each represent very interesting and historic times. But more significantly is a sense of honor and humility in serving a mission as important and as noble as the mission this school has had since the very beginning, 1842, the mission of educating our posterity. You know, it was once said by an ancient Greek philosopher that the foundation of a civilized society is the education of its youth. And so contributing to a mission that does just that, well, what could be more noble? And in MMI's case, as has been true since Murphy's first days here in 1871, there's the added nobility of providing for the experience of military protocols, military standards, leadership, education, and character development. This defines the MMI experience, one that substantially enriches the college academic experience and provides for more accomplished, well-rounded young men and women, you all, who will go on to become successful, honorable leaders, preparing them, you, in our unique and special way, to become the leaders of our military, our government, our communities, our businesses and industries, to become the leaders of our country. This is MMI's legacy. This is our noble mission. So yes, for me, to serve as MMI president, to be part of this noble mission, to be part of the great history of this school, to be part of our superb faculty and staff, to be associated with our future in this outstanding Corps of Cadets, and to be among the distinguished line of presidents displayed in this historic chapel with this portrait in the ceremony today, yes, it is both a great honor and it is very, very humbling. Thank you.
Now for the painting. Now for the painting. In recent years, our presidential paintings were done by Margaret Ellen Webb, and if you look down through there, you'll see some of Margaret Ellen's work. When we realized that Margaret Ellen was not going to be able to paint this one, Suzanne McKee set out to find an artist. And thank you, Suzanne, as Colonel Mollahan indicated, for a job well done. Also thanks Buffy Walters, who was also instrumental in this project for us. The painter of the portrait is Ms. Wendy MacArthur. For more than 15 years, Wendy has devoted herself to commissioned oil portraits. Painting is a passion for her, and she is happiest behind the easel. Wendy attributes her success to prayer, her dedication in studying her craft, and miles of canvas. Mr. Moody, Colonel Mollahan and your family, would you please come forward to unveil the portrait?